My name is Natalie Bryant and I'm the Director of Classifications at the Independent Hospital Pricing Authority and a proud Yuin woman from the south coast of New South Wales. I'm very excited to be introducing the next session for you today, a unique educational piece on ochres, paint history and national symbols with Uncle Waylon Boney from Gurrawin. Uncle Waylon is a senior Aboriginal lawman from the Kamilaroi Country and through his family, Wanaruah with connections to Ngemba Country. He's the founder of Gurrawin, an Indigenous organisation that promotes cultural education around New South Wales and works with vulnerable youths and adults in community. In the Western education system, Uncle Waylon is one of 8 Australians in 2020 with a certified qualification on the professional practice of Aboriginal law and culture. He encourages everyone, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to learn the stories of the oldest culture of the world in order to better understand how to love Gunni Thakkun, Mother Earth, and look after one another. Please ask questions through the live Q&A panel on your screen. We will try and get through as many as we can, and remember you can like questions that have been asked by other people. We really hope you enjoy Uncle Waylon's session. Welcome.
Thank you, Natalie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session. I hope you like what I have to share with you all today. Firstly, I'd like to do a bit of an acknowledgement of country, which is really important. I'd like to acknowledge all my old people and the land that I'm working on today, which is in the beautiful Ngemba Country. I'd like to also acknowledge my mother, so Gunni Thakkun, Mother Earth. We call our father Bayami, which is one of our creators. I also like to pay respect to Wanaruah, the big rainbow serpent that gave us all the water. I'd like to acknowledge the sun. The sun is, it's not always, a given that she's going to rise up for us. So I'd like to acknowledge her for rising up for us every day and pay respect to all of them. Pay respect to all my ancestors and acknowledge that they gave us the law, long before, the law was here long before we ever existed, and the law will be here long after we've gone. And the law is always in the country. As long as we sit long enough to listen, then we'll always relearn what has been lost and always continue to live our culture. But so my name's Waylon Boney. I'm from, Natalie said I was from the Hunter Valley, which is called the Wanaruah people. My family come from northern New South Wales, which is a place called Kamilaroi Country or Language. The Quayamble dialect is what we spoke, and the place there is called Gurrawin. The place where I come from is called Gurrawin, which is like the long plains country. So if I was to introduce myself traditionally, I would say Kamilaroi, Quayamble, Gurrawin, Ipai, and that would tell all the other mobs when I was travelling country, tell all the other mobs who I was, what language I spoke and where I sat. So then they would be able to say, over there is your grandmother, that's your grandfather, that's your brothers, they're your sisters, and they'd be able to place me within the kinship system. So all the way across this country, from the east coast of Australia to the west coast, we were placed into a family group. And that's why we were able to live in harmony for so long, is because we're seeing everyone as family. And we live a law or a system of giving. And when you travel to different places in the country, you have different words for that. So in the desert, they call it nyapati. In my language, we call it nukri, which the concept is like, if everyone gives, then everyone receives and no one has to take anything. Which is why we were able to live in harmony. So when we travelled, we shared story, we shared food, we shared knowledge with each other, shared space with each other. So then that allowed us to look after one another. So my family come from there. I've been practicing culture for all my life. I grew up learning about a little bit about it from my uncles and learning stories and learning to play the didgeridoo and so on and so forth. Dancing quite a lot. When I got older, I met one old man, and he's a pretty special old man, which I'd like to acknowledge him as well. Dummo Paul Gordon. He's given me a lot of knowledge, but also a lot of people around New South Wales and Australia, a lot of cultural knowledge and done a lot of these things around around Australia. He's a very special old man. I'd just like to pay my respect to him. Today, we're going to do a bit of talking about ochres, but I don't want to limit to that. I want to tell some stories as well, because I believe that, we have, there's a lot of knowledge to be shared, and it can't really be done in an hour. But if I can get some stuff across to connect you with our culture and our stories, then hopefully that'll intrigue you to come and learn more. So I want to share a bit of knowledge and just not concentrate on one thing. So to start off, I'm just going to talk a bit about the ochres and the importance of that. So with the ochres, we have a lot of different colours from my country, and one of the main ones from my country is the white. And in this jar is the white ochre, and the white ochre is for everyone. So everyone can wear the white ochre, and we paint the kids up in this, and we do all their designs in the white ochre, and that's connecting them to our mother. So when we paint up, it comes from our mother, and we sing songs about our mother, and we paint the kids up, and we're teaching them about it. And while we're teaching them about that connection to mother, we're also teaching them about giving. So there's old songs where the old people will sing songs and rub the baby's arms and sing to them, and they were singing the law into them and saying, "Oh, always give, always share, and always love." And that's what that paint ups are about, is that connection to our mother. So the white is for everyone. Everyone can wear the white. The black, which is like the charcoal. So we have the charcoal that we crush up and grind up, and that's for everyone as well. And there's that's connection to that fire and to the mother also. That fire spirit and telling them about more stories around that with the crow and the a lot of other stories related to the magpie and things like that. So the black is for everyone. Then we have the yellow. The yellow is for initiated women. So when the young girls come of age, they will go through a process to then allow them to wear the yellow. And I suppose that's not the process to be allowed to wear the yellow. Like, it's a process. It's not like the ochre. The ochre represents that they're women, but that the process isn't about just wearing the ochre. There's a lot of other things they need to learn and to connect with as well. But that's a symbol that the women the young girls have been initiated into womanhood, which I don't know much about because I'm a man. And this one here is the red ochre, and the red ochre is for men only. And this will change across the country. Like the story will change. So I'm just sharing knowledge that I've been passed down from my country and my people, and so this will change. And that's what our old people did, is that knowledge may have changed, and they never said that it was different. They never said it was wrong. Like, they never said, "Oh, your knowledge is wrong and my knowledge is right." My story is better than your story. They always said, "Oh, your story is a little bit different, but same. So a little bit different to my story, but the same story." So we have the same colours across the country, but the rules and things that might change and adapt. So I'm just teaching you stuff that I know from my country. So the red ochre is for the initiated men. So when the young boys come of age and go through a process, they're allowed to wear the red ochre then and connect with that. When you go to certain places in the country, caves and things like that, you can identify what area that place is, whether it's a woman's area, whether it's a men's area, whether it's a family area, based on what was in the cave. I've seen a lot of caves where, I'll tell you one story. I came across a cave where it was all women, all yellow hands and things like that in the cave, and that's telling me that I've got to go. Like, I'm in a woman's area, so I have to go. I can't hang around there and explore and be intrigued by everything. I have to go. So I've come across a lot of caves where there's red and yellow and white and black and everything, and they're telling me that that's a family cave, or that's a shared ceremonial place. So it wasn't always men's business and women's business. We did stuff quite a lot together as well. So we always helped each other and did things together, which is not. A lot of people believe that Aboriginal culture was male dominant, and it wasn't really male dominant. It was more when colonisation came, when they colonised this country. Their culture was very male dominant, so they only spoke to our males and our men. So a lot of the recordings of the past, there was a lot about men's business and things like that. But in the law, in our culture, it was very, very balanced. The men and women had an obligation and responsibility to one another. And if they didn't uphold that responsibility and obligation, then we believed that our world would end. So it wasn't male dominant, it wasn't female dominant. It was we had an obligation, responsibility. Everyone understood their roles, and everyone completed their roles. There's a story that we take young people to when we're teaching them about their responsibility and obligation. And just really quickly on that, when I was younger, my grandfather, Damo Paul, I call him my grandfather, he said to me, he said, "You don't have any rights." And I said, "Oh, I was sort of like, what do you mean?" He said, "You don't have any rights." He said, "You only have responsibility and obligation as a young boy." And he said, "And your responsibility and obligation is to shut up and listen." And he said, and listen to your mum and listen to the old people. He said, because that's the only way you're going to learn. He said, "You don't have any rights." And then when I got older, I started to think about, as I started to get older, and I started, he said it a lot direct, but I'm just putting it nicely. But as I got older, I started to think about that, the rights versus responsibility and obligation. And when I would go to, out bush, and I would learn about my responsibility and obligation, and it was all positive things. It was about looking after one another. It was about sharing. It was about giving back to community. It was about looking after family. And it was always these positive things. And then I became a man, and I went to, came back to the community, and I tried to uphold these responsibilities and obligations, and people started to say, "No, you're a young boy. You can't do all these things." And they're saying, "You're young. You're too young." And then when I turned 18, they said, "Oh, you're a man now." So I was already a man in the cultural way, and I had all these responsibility and obligations. But then when I turned 18 in the Western world, they said, "Oh, you're 18 now, and you have all these rights." And all the rights were all these negative things, like you have the right to go to the pub, and you have the right to gamble, and you have the right to buy cigarettes, and you have the right to, to do all these bad things. And I was thinking, if that's what it takes to be a man in this world, I don't want that. I want my responsibility and obligation. I want my responsibility and obligation, and that's what the law teaches you. So when I started to learn about all this stuff, I started to want more of my responsibility and obligation. So we have a big place that we go and teach kids, young people, about this, about their responsibilities, called the Turkey. And when you go there, it's a big carving, a rock carving dated over 8,000 years old. and there's a turkey sectioned off, and it's all cut up into little bits, in all these sections. And my old people, they say, oh, if that's, you, and then that's me, you're the neck, Waylon, and I'm the foot, and my younger brother's the body, for an example. And they say, what happens if you don't do your job? If you don't uphold your responsibility and obligation, Waylon, and you're the neck of that turkey, what happens to that turkey? And I say, oh, the turkey can't eat, it can't swallow. So therefore the turkey dies. And they say, exactly right. If we don't uphold our responsibility and obligation to one another, then our world, that turkey, it dies. And that really resonated with me. And then as you get older, you start to learn more about that roles of, your roles and responsibilities to men and women. And if the men and women don't uphold their responsibility and obligation to one another either, then our world does end. So that's just all this stuff is in the country. All this stuff is still in the country, and we still go and visit all these places, and we still have the evidence of our creation and of our past. And that's why we say that the law is still in the land. The law was in the land a long time before we came to be, and the law will continue to be there long after we've gone. So, it's all there for us still. We haven't lost the law, we still have it there. It's still all there for us. So, going back to the ochres, so the red ochre is for the men, yellow for the women, white and black for everyone. And then we have the designs. So when we're painting up, we're singing these songs and we're painting their designs, and we can do the designs of the kangaroo, and we can do the designs of the, the kangaroo, the emu, all these different things. And it connects us to our family, connects us to our we call our ancestor, not really our totem, but more our ancestor. And I could have many ancestors. I could have, the blue-tongued lizard, the black snake, the emu, the kangaroo, the goanna. And I could have many paint-ups that I wear on many different occasions, and I wear on many different ceremonies and different corroborees. So corroborees are dancing, like big dances, big gatherings. And I just want to tell you about one big gathering that our people done. Was in Western New South Wales at a place called the fish traps at a place called Wanaruah. And when you get a chance, I want you to Google good old Uncle Google. He's got all the knowledge. I want you to Google the Wanaruah fish traps. The Wanaruah fish traps is the oldest man-made structure in the world, and that's in Western New South Wales, and it's over 40,000 years old. Not many people know about it, and it's not very protected. So I want to bring awareness to that, is saying, well, how do we protect our places that are significant in our country? And the only way we can do that is by sharing knowledge and educating everyone about it. So when you get a chance, Google the Wanaruah fish traps, and the oldest man-made structure in the world is out there. And maybe one day, if you've ever come to Australia, or if anyone's in Australia already, then we can organise a trip out there and show everyone, and take you and show you the evidence of that creation, of that place, which is always important as well. So corroborees are really big. We had gatherings of over 40,000 to 100,000 people that would gather for these corroborees, depending on where it was. And they would stay. It wasn't like how we do everything on a weekend, like, we've got to work all week, and then we'll go into, then we'll go to a corroboree on the weekend. Our people would walk there. And when they would walk there, they wouldn't walk, for a couple of hours or a couple of days. They'd walk for, weeks or months. And when they would camp, they would camp for a couple of days or a week or however long they wanted to. So they would walk country, see story along the way, and then they would camp and stay in that place for a long time. And then they would continue to walk and travel until they got there. So they might spend, 2 to 3 months traveling just for this one corroboree or this one ceremony. they would stay there for that ceremony where they would paint up in their designs and they would sing their songs and they would do their corroborees and they would do their celebrations and have fun and pay respect to who they needed to pay respect to or what they needed to pay respect to. And then they would travel home, and they might be there for that corroboree for 3 months as well. And then they might take 3 months to walk home. So they're taking 9 months just to travel for one ceremony. And along the way, they'd be doing different ceremonies and catching up with different people. But they'd be traveling for that 3 months to get to that one place. They'd stay there for that place and share culture, share knowledge, share story, and then they would travel home. And they would always go back home. Like they were. People say that Aboriginal people were nomadic. Like we weren't nomadic. We had homes. Like we had little villages, like little civilizations that we would live at. And we would travel. Yes, we would travel for ceremony, but we always went home. And with that, when Aboriginal people were born, they inherited land. So when I was growing up, my grandfather said, he said, you know where people say that Aboriginal people don't own the land, you know, that the land owns us? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, that's wrong. He said, because only through ownership can you love something. And we loved our country and our place so intimately. You know, we loved it like it was a family member. And he said, and then he started to teach me. He said, well, when Aboriginal people were born, he said they inherited land. And when they inherited that land, they inherited the story that went with that land of how that place came to be. And then they learned everything about their place in their world, which we call Nurumpa. So they learned everything about their Nurumpa, about their place, and they learned everything about the trees, about the grasses, about the animals. They learned about, you know, the ants, the stars, everything in their world, a part of their Nurumpa they learned about their land that they inherited, and they knew everything about it. When they learned everything, you know, everything about it, they learned this at about the age of 11. They had so much knowledge about their place that they knew how to make medicine. They knew all the bush tucker. They knew how to make and prepare all the bush tucker, and prepare all the medicines. They knew all the ceremonies. They knew their relationship with all that. So and how all the trees were related. So we talk about you know, family groups for trees. Like we had the same thing, and we put them all in our kinship system. So we knew all the relationships, and they knew that by the age of 11, and then they would go through the law and through their ceremonies to become men and women at the age of 11. You know, some younger if they needed to, some older if they needed to as well. So I'll go back to those. I'll mix some up for you. So I'll just mix up a bit of the red, and then I'm going to paint some on, and I'll show you how bright it is and how vibrant and when we do paint up, it makes us feel like we're not different, but it makes us feel really good. Like it makes us feel like we are warriors, you know. But we're not warriors. Like it wasn't about warriors. It was about, I don't know. It makes me feel different. So I'm pretty shy, as you can tell. As you can all tell, I'm pretty shy. And well, when I was younger, I was pretty shy anyway. And when I first started to dance, and I started to dance in public, they would teach us that you're not there. You know, when you paint up, you're not dancing for a crowd or for people. You're dancing for, you know, your mother. You know, you're dancing for your father. And when I say mother, I mean Mother Earth, like Gunni Thakkun. And when we're stomping and we're waking her up and we're letting her feel our love, you know. And that's our way of giving back, to say that we acknowledge you and we know who you are. And we dance for our father, and we acknowledge him and pay respect to him, and we dance for all our ancestors. So when we would paint up, they would say that to us. So it made us feel like we were invincible. Not invisible, invincible. So this is the red ochre. So you can see the red ochre, and you can see how bright that is. See, and it's really special. It connects us, and when we wear this, we have to be pure. Like we've got to be pure and empty, and think good thoughts and positivity. So that's the red ochre for you guys. And I'm not doing any corroborees today, so I'm not going to get up and dance. But when we feel that, when we do that, when we paint up, we feel very strong. Like we feel very connected to our mother, connected to our father, and it's a much deeper thing than just putting paint on it. It's not a novelty to us to continue to learn our culture or practice. Like we are the oldest living culture. And we can say that because we continue to live it. So when we hear a story, and when we hear a story, we try to live that story. And I just want to share one story with you guys about our creation. And it's the first story that everyone learns when they were a young kid growing up, from my country anyway. And a long time ago in the Nurumpa, so in what we call Maratalpu. So Maratalpu, and a long time ago in the very beginning. And instead of the dream time, we call it the Nurumpa. So the Nurumpa. And the dream time sort of says, that it was a dreamt thing, but Nurumpa is real, like it exists. We still live in the Nurumpa. So a long time ago in the Nurumpa, the Maratalpu, a long time ago in the very beginning, Gunni Thakkun, so Mother Earth, she lived underwater. And something started to move inside her belly, and it started to make her really sick. And Mother rose up out of the water to see what was making her really sick. And when she rose up out of the water, she decided not to go back in. When she did that, what was moving inside her belly was the big rainbow serpent. And he came out of the water as well, and he looked across the land, across Mother, and Mother was flat and red. And he said, well, if Mother's not going back to the water, then I'm not going to go back to the water. And he started to travel. And he started to travel into the land. Not across the land like we see serpents today. He started traveling into the land. He started to make these big holes. And he'd go in and come out and go in and come out. And while he was doing that, all his scales were dragging all the water from the ocean and filling these big holes up full of water. And all the salt started to settle at the bottom and go into the land, and it started to leave all these fresh water holes at the top. And that started to bring a bit of life, a bit of colour to Mother, and started to make her look really beautiful. And Boemi, which lives in the sky, he seen Mother, and he fell in love with her. So he came down from the sky to be with her. And Boemi made love to Mother in different parts of the country, and she gave birth to the creation animals, the first 4 animals. And the first one was the goanna, the second was the emu, then the kangaroo, and then the echidna. And Boemi said to them, he said, help me shape the land and put the law into the land. He said, and when you're finished, come and live with me in the stars, and we'll celebrate. So all animals went out, and they started to shape the land and put the law into the land and travel. And the goanna, he rushed everything. And then he rested and, relaxed, waited for everyone else to catch up to him. The kangaroo was really lazy. He just did nothing. He laid down and went to sleep and wanted everyone else to do his job for him. The echidna, she walked really slow, dragging her feet, taking her time, and kicking the stones. But the emu, she did a good job, and she walked all the way to a place called Wanaruah. She met with Boemi, and they waited. And when the other animals didn't turn up, Boemi came looking for them. And Boemi came across them being lazy. He came across them being slow. He came across them, rush everything, and he punished them for not listening to him. He punished them, and he made them a part of the landscape. And Boemi looked at the back of the echidna, and the echidna's back was the highest point in the land. And Boemi stepped on the back of the echidna, flattened the echidna's back, and jumped back up into the stars. The emu, she could fly a long time ago, so she flew up into the stars and she became a part of the Milky Way. But so that story there is one of the first stories that our people learned when we were younger. And when we unpack that story, we look at, it teaches us that, mother was underwater, she came up. It teaches us about, mother teaches us about Waylon, the big rainbow serpent, and how he created the big waterholes. Teaches us about Boemi coming down from the sky and made love to mother. She gave birth to the first 4 animals. So we know what the animals are, the first 4 animals. In my country, when I can tell you that story, but then I can take you and show you where them 4 animals are. And when I tell you that story and I show you where them 4 animals are, it connects you to the country and your place. So you learn more about your area, your country, your place. And then I can show you the emu in the sky, and so it connects you to the sky. It connects you to the law of the sky. It also gives us morals and values. So when I talk about Aboriginal people live the law, like live their culture, we talk about listening. They got punished because they didn't listen. They also rush. So when we tell our kids that story, we say, "Oh, you're being like that goanna," and they say, "No, I'm not being like that goanna. I'm not rushing. I'll do it properly, and I want to be like that emu." Or we might go in and usually know when you tell your kids something, you say, "Oh, go and clean your room," and they kick their feet or they drag their feet and move really slow. And we say to our kids, "Oh, do you want to be like that echidna? You're moving really slow like that echidna." "Oh, no, I'm not being like that echidna. I'm going to be like that emu." So we start to give them morals and values and ways to live and to do a good job. So and our kids live that. When they hear that story, and they don't hear that story once or twice, they hear that story all the time. Like we tell it to them like bedtime stories, and they hear it all the time, and then they start to live it. And we say, see that kangaroo over there, that mountain? He didn't listen. Remember, he was lazy. So we start to point out the evidence of that. And then they start to see what the consequences of if they don't follow the rules. Does that make sense? It's all good. So that's why Aboriginal people can say we are the oldest living culture in the world, because we still live our culture. We still live our law. And when we hear the stories, we still put them into our lives even today. So we can still teach them kids. They're still relatable. And when we talk about Aboriginal health, Aboriginal health being like they talk about closing the gap and things like that in Aboriginal health. The only way we can do that is by giving the people the law, giving people the knowledge, and start sharing these stories with our people so they understand it. They understand their role. They start to feel complete. Our people at the moment are feeling like they have no connection, that they feel a hole, a black hole inside them that they can't fill with anything. And no matter what they do, whether they go and seek out, help, or seek out, education or university degrees, or go on to become big CEOs of, big companies and things like that, they'll always feel this black hole that they can't fill because they don't have their law. So these stories and this connection and this knowledge that we have is really important in, I suppose, holistic well-being, health and well-being. We know that it has to start with these stories and this culture. So hopefully that stories intrigue you guys to come and learn more. I would really like to show people that stuff, and you can't learn culture and gain knowledge from one session or an hour, only an hour. We need to spend a couple of days and traveling the country and looking at that stuff. So there's the red ochre dry. Everyone can see it's drying. It's really strong and it stains your skin. And I don't know what the yellow does because I've never worn the yellow, and I don't intend to. But the white and the black, they rub off really easily, but the red stains your skin. It's really hard to get out. But yeah, I like it. I enjoy it. Give me a couple of days. So I think I'm going to wrap that up now, and we can get on to the Q&As. I'd like to thank everyone for listening. I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me to share. It's really important for us to share and continue to give people our stories and our connections, so then they hopefully intrigues them to come and learn more about our place. So thank you.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Uncle Waylon. It was a really informative session, and I think something that you said yesterday really resonated and carried through in what you were saying today, which was continuation, not preservation. And we are the oldest living culture in the world, and we continue to live our culture. And it was really lovely. I think the comment that we've got through the questions that has the most likes is from Julie Lawrence. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing your stories. And I think I really enjoyed that as well. So just a couple of questions. So firstly, from Cameron Lee, as a foreign-born resident, where can I learn more about and engage with Indigenous culture and history?
Well, from local people. There's a lot of groups that are actually out there now on social media that have really good knowledge. Depending on what area, like if you could specify an area, maybe I could help. Maybe get visit my website or get the contact details and give me a call, and maybe I could help connect you up with a few people in your area that have really good knowledge. And yeah, so yeah, making contact, and don't be afraid. Just getting out there and asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the only way we can learn, eh?
Absolutely. I think another one from Julie, I think this is more of a comment, but I think again it sort of resonated with what you have just talked about. Aboriginal people have overcome such adversity. Healthcare needs to learn and incorporate culture and the very real effect of colonisation into care planning before we see real change in experience and health outcomes. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about law and understanding our cultural history and our connection to culture is so important in improving health outcomes and closing the gap. So hopefully we can continue to do that. So from Mark Salmons, are there specific shapes or colours special to only a body location, like a leg, or is it more free choice of design from individual users and dancers? And I was going to ask a similar question. As I was talking to you before, as a child, I did dancing. I only ever got white paint, but there was handprints and stripes. And what's the difference in the significance of the handprints and the stripes and the body parts in which are painted up?
The handprints could represent especially if the old aunties or old uncles are painting you up, it could be like that protection. They're putting that protection on you and looking after you, because when you're young, you don't really paint up yourself. It's always the old people or your family that paint you up. So they'll either put the design on you that they want to put on for that special occasion, which can't be made up. Like, it's all passed down, from family to family. So it has to be specific to different areas on your body. But if they, when they're doing that, they're putting that protection on you. So the handprints could represent their connection to you, that they're saying that you're my granddaughter or my, niece or nephew, and I'm looking after you, and I'm your teacher, more or less. And so that would be the importance of that. Designs couldn't be just made up. It has to be, it has to. There's certain designs that people can't do or can't really know about. Like, they might see it, but they can't really know about it. And if they do ask about it, they'll say, the old people usually say, "Oh, you'll find out later," or they will just ignore your question or something like that. But yeah, it has to be. You can't just go and make one up because it could be taking someone else's design, another family group, or could represent another animal or something completely different. So yeah, the designs are specific to the location and what you're doing, and they have to be accurate to where you're putting everything.
Wonderful. So another question from Sharon Neal in relation to the ochres. Do these colours change in different tribes or language groups, and does the meaning of the colours remain the same? I think you briefly touched on this earlier.
Yeah, they can change across the country, and it might flip, or it might everyone can paint up in all the colours. But where I'm from, and when I travel, I adapt. Like when I travel, I adapt to that law. Like I have respect to adapt that. I don't say, "Oh, you're wrong." Like it's not about. It's about living under many systems and adapting and being able to say, "Ah, that's your story. I respect your story," and and that's how our people live. So yeah, there's the colours may change over the country. The meanings for the colours might change, but where I'm come from, that's how it is for a lot of mobs in pretty much New South Wales, and well, not putting it down to a state because we didn't have states, but a big area like New South Wales and into Queensland are pretty much the same. I know that I know that the desert mobs are pretty much the same as us as well. I know in Arnhem Land it changes. In Arnhem Land it might change a bit, but pretty much the same all the way across the country.
Okay, so we've got another question here from, sorry, I've lost it. Can you provide some examples or describe the difference between men's business and women's business?
Examples, male and female. No, I'm kidding. It could, like examples in what way? Like so, styles might be dancing. Dancing styles might be different. I know that the women don't really stomp as hard as men, because they can be, they're already connected to that mother, they're already that woman. The dancing styles will be different. Um, yeah, I don't know. As in ceremony wise, I can't really specify because I know, like men's business. I don't know women's business, so I couldn't tell you a difference in any of it. I can't really speculate.
Okay, another question here about, sorry, we've got lots of comments coming through. Is there one thing you would like non-First Nations people to consider when thinking of this modern living culture? If you could get one takeaway idea across, what would it be?
One takeaway idea across.
What's your one? What's your elevator pitch? What do we need to take away from today's session?
What do we need? I think like if we all, if we say, if you love your country. So when I was younger, my grandfather said, "How much do you love your country?" And I said, "I love my country heaps." And he said, "Well, how much do you know about your country?" And I said, "Oh, I know heaps about it." And he pointed to a tree and he said, "Well, what's that tree?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, you know nothing about your country." And he said, "If you know nothing about your country, then how can you love it? How can you say you love your country if you know nothing about it?" So my takeaway, my thing would be, if we say we love our country, we love our place, and we have over 200,000 years of knowledge in this place, why would you not want to go and learn all that knowledge beyond 200 years? If you have, over 200,000 years of knowledge in this country, the only way we can say we love it is by learning the 200 years of knowledge. So go and learn your history, go and learn your past, because the past, all our knowledge comes from the past. So go and learn about the history beyond 200 years, is what I'd say. So then you can truly love your country.
That's a great takeaway, Waylon. I think absolutely. I think the history of Australia is much broader than since Captain Cook arrived here, and I think a lot of people often forget that. One question here from Nathan Wilcox: Do most First Nations communities share the same creation and other stories? And I think there's, in my experience, there's certainly similarities between the creation stories. But are you able to share more about where they are, like where those similarities and differences lie?
Yeah, there's similarities, but our people didn't look at they looked at it all as being similar. Like it was all a little bit different, but same. Um, Maybe not there's that story of the creation. A good example. I suppose I like to use is, I don't know. It's a good question. Um, if you're talking about countries, well, like world countries or our countries in Australia, all the way across this country, there'll be different stories, but they say, oh, a little bit different, same. And when we talk about the creation animals, we relate it to what the animals are today, so then people can identify. But when we truly, as you get older and you learn more about them animals, the first four animals, you learn that they were like, you know, different to what we see the animals today. So when we talk about the big goanna, he was a big monster, like a big crocodile cross thing. So when people in northern Queensland and Arnhem Land talk about the in my story we call goanna, but in their story they call it crocodile.
Hmm.
We relate it to the biggest reptile of that place, you know. So that's the similarities in saying, well, relating it to now, like to what we, and they had their own names, like they had their own names. They had, yeah, that's a good question. But in the sense of how our old people look at the story, they say, well, in the beginning, the women held the law, and this old woman decided to give it to their her son. So her son was named Tharamulan. She decided to give the law to her son, to share, to then go and share with the men. So she took the law out of her dilly bag and gave it to her son, and then he went and shared it with the men. And that's my story for my country. And then in Arnhem Land, they tell a similar story with that, but they say, oh, the little boy went and stole it out of the dilly bag, out of his, the old woman's dilly bag, and ran and gave it to the men. So it's a little bit different, but same, you know.
Yeah. I remember hearing stories that I guess it's similar to the people in the Maori people of New Zealand and the Hawaiian people of Hawaii. They have same but different stories in terms of their origin stories, and
Yeah,
so
Tane Mahuta, is it? He he laid on his back and he laid on his back and he pushed up the sky, separated the mother and the father. So similar, but
similar.
I don't even know if I got that right. Hopefully I got that right.
Just an
I shouldn't make up for this.
Another question here from Tristan. Can you tell us a bit about any cultural traditions or rules about who can paint images of ancestors? And I'm going to assume he means animals as well as people, as well as our stories.
Yeah, so when I know, like in different parts of the country, when they paint, when they paint up in the Kimberley, I suppose, when they paint the Wandjina and things like that, you had to, there were specific people that owned it. So when I talk about like inheriting land, and then you inherit that story, so the owners of that story have to paint that Wandjina, and so in my country uh, we have people who inherit story and inherit things, and we like inherit land, inherit story. Uh, but now, because a lot of things are owned by national parks, if we go and redo them stories, then we get fined, which is the sad part. But yeah, like different. It had to be the owner of the story. Uh, so there's a lot of things. So it's about unpacking a lot to try and make sense for you guys. So in our system, we have a story, the owner of the story, the teller of the story, the keeper of the story, the dancer of the story, and the singer of the story. So them 5 groups of people, because it wouldn't just be 5 people, it'd be 5 groups of people that I would own all that. They would have to come together to make sure that they get that whole thing right, and they would sing the songs and they would do the dances and everything was a ceremony. So when they repainted the stories or the symbols, um, they would have to all be together to decide to make sure it was accurate, and that's how Aboriginal stories um, were able to be passed down orally over thousands of years and still be accurate. Hello.
Hi, Waylon.
Well,
Brilliant. Sorry about that, guys. Just a few technical difficulties here in the studio. Look, I think we've got a few more questions that have come through. We've got lots of comments. So thank you for sharing. Can you explain your journey to becoming an elder, an uncle?
Like a journey, like the journey of that, I suppose, would be like my old grandfather said, like you know, your responsibility and obligation is to shut up and listen, and that's really the only way we can gain knowledge. So knowledge is the most valuable thing in our uh, culture, and that's why our elders and our people, our elders were um, the most valued people because they had held all the knowledge. So the way you become, I suppose, an elder would to be, to gain knowledge, earn the respect of the people, share knowledge because uh, knowledge is only powerful if you share it. And that old man, that's a quote that old man, Dummo Paul Gordon. He says, knowledge is powerful, but only when you share it. Because if you don't share it, how do people know you have that knowledge? So, what makes our elders an elder is that they share the knowledge. They don't hold it in. They don't hold it in. They share it and give it, so then it gets passed on to the next generation over and over. So yeah, there's obviously a bigger process to that as well, like traveling and building relationships with a lot of different people. But simplified, it'd be knowledge. So gaining the knowledge and sharing it.
Thanks, Waylon. We might wrap it up with just one last comment here. Thank you for sharing your stories and helping me to expand my understanding about your culture, providing food for thought for our journey through the healthcare system. And I think it's been a really interesting session, and hopefully people have taken a lot out of that. I know I certainly have enjoyed shutting up and listening for the last hour or so, and really appreciate everything that you've said to us today. Thank you very much, Uncle Waylon, and I'll hand back to James.
No worries, thank you.
Very much, Uncle Waylon. Every time I get to attend one of these sessions, I learn more and more about things that I really should know more about. So thank you very much. And I think your advice to ask more questions and listen more to the stories of your people are really, really good. So thank you very much. So it's now time for people to move back to the timeline, and coming up next, live from Wales at 6 a.m. in the morning, is Dr. Sally Lewis speaking about value-based healthcare. So if you want to head over to the timeline and then to the other room, I'll see you there shortly.